Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Musician from Hits Academy, a newsletter, coaching service, podcast, and blog preparing today's musicians for tomorrow's realities. Today's episode is titled, What is Your Bounceback Rating? Quickly, thank you to Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for TEM. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba Mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Quickly, a shout out. Didn't I just say quickly for Parker Mouthpieces? Quickly, I'll just say quickly before everything, and there'll be a bunch of quicklies, and it'll end up being a 15-minute episode. Quickly, TEM Coaching has a newsletter through Hits Academy. A big hello to the new subscribers. I really appreciate you checking it out. I send out on Mondays, last week was on Wednesday because gestures broadly, but on Mondays I send out a quartet of ideas. Last week, the most clicked on link in that quartet of ideas was a 2-minute read about the word that you need to avoid using at all costs and why it is a red flag if you do use it. If you would like to subscribe to this newsletter or just check it out, you can go to tem.fm and then click on newsletter. And then you can see actually all of the previous issues of Quartet of Ideas. I think that's the first time I haven't called them episodes accidentally in about 3 months. So yay me. I guess the goal now is to call them issues and not episodes and then not interrupt to take credit for it. But baby steps, I guess. You can also just go to signup.tem.fm to sign up. You can unsubscribe at any time, but it is really great for those of you who are already with me. I really appreciate that you are along on this journey with me, and I appreciate all of you while I'm at it who are listening. There's a lot. When I first started this podcast, there weren't tons of options for music business podcasts, and now there are a lot. So if you are listening to me, then it means either you're lost, or maybe you have some self-loathing issues, or you actually find it valuable. Anyway, regardless, I don't care any of those 3 reasons. I'm happy you're here. What is your bounce back rating? This idea was not completely stolen from Brene Brown. I kind of took an idea of hers and changed it, made it a little bit more specific, but it was directly inspired by something that I heard her talk about in the audiobook, The Power of Vulnerability. 2 huge thumbs up for that Power of Vulnerability. It's not actually a book, but it was, I think, a series of presentations that she gave. I am listening on Audible, and it is one of those things where I am taking a very long time to get through it because I keep hearing something that is so deeply impactful. Like, I'm talking like every 5 minutes, I'm hearing something that is so deeply impactful that I have to pause to process it. And sometimes I write a note, it's inspiring an episode idea. It's like whatever, like my brain is going a million miles an hour. And sometimes I have to come back to it the next day. This is a very good problem to have. In fact, next week's episode of TEM is going to be a quote that I pulled from The Power of Vulnerability, and it's going to be about these 9 words that I've been thinking about ever since I heard them a month ago. It's really, really powerful stuff. So I'm guessing that the phrase bounce back rating is probably pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about it and why it is so important for those of us on an entrepreneurial path as musicians. If your business doesn't have a hard part, then you don't have a business. You've heard this before. So by definition, setbacks will happen. They will. There's no one that gets to do the hard part and they just skip any setbacks and they just do the thing successfully. Literally no one. So when they happen to everyone, then what can we do about it? The answer is that we can learn how to bounce back from these inevitable setbacks. Note I said learn how, not that we should already be good at this. I really do believe that this is something that you learn. I think it's a skill that not only can be acquired, but I would go so far as to argue that probably 98% of the world needs to learn this skill or needs to get better at it, at least on some level. So how do we go about doing this? I have 2 suggestions for you today. The first is framing setbacks as a good sign, and the second is measuring and tracking your bounce back rating. Let me take these one at a time. First, the framing setbacks as a good sign. I've said it a dozen times on this podcast, so I might as well say it for a second time in like 90 seconds. If your business doesn't have a hard part, you don't have a business. The hard parts wouldn't be hard parts if there was an obvious and easily executed solution. Sometimes there are setbacks which are the results of it's the result of being lazy or careless or simply bad luck. We all know that feeling, and we will all know that feeling again. But I think you already know that that's not the kind of thing that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a real setback, one that at least in the moment feels like it is insurmountable or might as well be. One where you were thoughtful and diligent and intentional, and it still did not go as planned, or worse, it went completely sideways. When you experience this, it actually means that you are on the right path, because it means that you are trying to solve a problem that is hard to solve. And if you are trying to solve a problem that can easily be solved by lots of people, then again, you don't have a business, because a whole bunch of people before you will have already offered the solution, and it is a race to the bottom at that point. You cannot charge people money for something that is easy to do, because it's like, you offer to do it for $5, I do it for $4, you do it for $3, I offer $2, $1, and then someone else actually does it for free as some sort of like a lead magnet, because they're trying to get someone into their ecosystem to then sell them something that's even more expensive. So if you're trying to solve a hard problem and you have a setback, it's actually a good sign. If you can keep this framing top of mind, which in my experience is easy to do except for when it's really hard to do, then you will treat every setback as encouragement and a sign that you are on the right path. One adage that I try to live by is that I am not responsible for my first thought, but I am very much responsible for my second one. I'm going to repeat that because that was some life-changing advice. This goes without saying, but anytime that I drop some nugget of wisdom that is like that good, I had absolutely no role in coming up with it whatsoever. I just am pretty good when I can read okay at like repeating other people's wisdoms. I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I'm very much responsible for my second one. So being discouraged, sad, disappointed, or even mad because of a setback is normal. It's healthy. No problem with it at all. My question is, am I still mad about it the next day, or a week later, or a month later, right? If someone cuts me off in traffic, just to use a silly example, is it understandable to be annoyed by that? Yes, it is, especially if they were like putting my life at risk. Although, let's be honest, 99% of people who cut me off are not putting any of my life at risk. I just like, I like to be self-righteously mad sometimes. Problem is that if like an hour and a half later, I'm still like even low-key aggravated because of this person, and then I see my son after school and I say hi to him, it's not like I'm snarling at him. But I'm just like, hey, and he's just like, what's wrong with you? And it's because somebody cut me off in DC traffic, which is very, very predictable. Then yeah, that's on me personally, right? So if I'm still mad about a setback the next day or the next week or whatever, I need to reframe it as quickly as possible so that I can learn from it, but keep moving down the path. That's really, really important. And I will tell you that if you've never tried to reframe something like this, then I am going to predict that you are going to struggle with reframing this at first. If you are the kind of person who is wired like me, where you can kind of get into the self-pity thing when things don't go quite well, or whatever, and I'm generalizing on purpose here. It's not as easy as I read in a book or I heard a dude on a podcast share this like really good point, and now I'm just going to I'm going to be responsible for my second thought. Just know that anybody can do it. It might take a little while, and for some of you, you might already do this, and some of you might be able to change it quickly. But there will be some of you like yours truly here that it's going to take a little while. So just work at it. And then the second thing is let's talk just briefly about measuring and tracking your bounce back rating. Anything that can be measured can be improved. Okay, that's really important. It's very hard to improve something that can't be measured, because then it's like, well, did it improve? Did it not improve? And that gets real nebulous real fast. I would suggest, if you'd like a specific homework assignment, I would suggest giving yourself a weekly bounce back rating score. That can be on a scale of 1 to 10. If you want to get a little more granular, it could be on a scale of 1 to 100. Just something that you can track over the course of 3 months, 6 months, or a year. The act of doing this every week, and you could also do it every month if that is better for you. The act of doing this every week or every month will keep the reframing aspect that I talked about in the first part of this top of mind, and that alone is invaluable. We are only 5 months into 2024 as I record this, and I have had some pretty special professional highlights, up to and including getting a shout out in the Washington Post by name when I played with the Washington National Opera, which was my first time playing with them. I've also had a couple of things that would have been really, really, really special that like fell through, that were virtual locks to happen. I'm talking like 90 something percent that like this thing had to happen, and then this thing had to happen, and then this thing had to happen, and then this thing had to happen, and in that order, and they all did, and it all fell through. I'm talking like I was in tears. I'm actually not sure I've ever had such a professional pendulum swing so drastic in both directions within just a couple of months of one another as I've had in the last few months. It's been all about reframing things, moving forward, and keeping my perspective. When I got the really, really devastating, artistically devastating, right? I mean, I won't get into it because if you listen to this all the time, you've heard me talk about this like 800 times in the last year. I've lost some real important people to myself. Like, nobody died, but on like an artistic level, this was devastating, right? I gave myself 3 full days, and I also want to be clear, the way that I wrote this here, it implies that I decided, like, I'm going to give myself 3 days. So I didn't give myself 3 days. I should have written this differently. I took 3 days. It ended up taking 3 days after I got this bad news, and I needed all 3 of those days. But then I came to peace with it. I did some meditating. I went on some hikes. Like I did some things that I know that can work for me if I'm grieving, if I'm dealing with a setback, if I just need a reset. And I accepted it, excuse me, after those few days, and I moved on to the next thing, even though that next thing was not nearly as glamorous, and best case scenario is not going to be nearly as fulfilling. But I'm going to give myself a 10 or 100, on the Bounceback rating for that, even though I was really a mess for 72 hours. I faced it, I processed it, I moved on to the next thing, and that's all that I can do. So to summarize, 2 things: reframe all setbacks as meaning that you are on the right path, and score yourself, score your bounce back rating, so that you can track improvement, and so you can keep the reframing that we talked about in the first part of the summary top of mind. Okay. This week's quote is from Carol Burnett, the brilliant, hilarious, enchanting Carol Burnett. Quote, "We all get where we're going by circuitous journeys, and some of the setbacks are warranted." I'm actually going to throw a graphic. If you're watching on YouTube, you're looking at it right now, up just in terms of like, no one's path is linear. No one. We all get where we're going by circuitous journeys, as Carol Burnett just said. Sometimes it can appear that someone's journey is pretty linear, and it never is as linear as it appears. I will just put it that way. And saying that we all get where we're going through circuitous journeys is like, that's coming from somebody as rich and famous and successful as Carol Burnett. I think that's powerful. It's easy for somebody who has struggled to say that, but when somebody like Carol Burnett, which if you're a youngster and you don't know who she is, you should Google her, because she was a real trailblazer in a lot of ways. I won't get into it, but she was wonderful. The other thing, the second thing that this quote is saying, is that not everything happens to us, right? Sometimes we do things to make the setbacks happen, or as she puts it, that makes the setbacks means that they're warranted. That's fine. We just learn from it and keep moving forward. Again, I don't know of, it can be dangerous, right? If your Instagram feed is filled with people posting perfect photos of themselves and like perfect vacation experiences and perfect everything. I will never forget the first time that I saw someone doing this in the wild, where this was a number of years ago now. I saw somebody who had obviously chosen like very specific light, very specific background. They took like 75 shots of themselves. They threw out 74 of them. They used the 75th one. They then used a filter and adjusted the lighting and, made their skin look a little bit better and made their hair like shine a little. It's like, oh, and then it was like, like really enjoying vacation. It's like, well, yeah. I'm not here to judge, right? But the truth is, like, if they had said, I just took 45 minutes to get the perfect shot, and then I altered it, and here's what it looked like. And by the way, I'm guilty as well, right? I'm in a glass house here, right? But when we compare our work in progress to someone else's finished product, and the finished product being that they ran it through an HDR filter and that they adjusted the this and the that and they cropped and they did the, like all of these things. And they take a photo in the golden hour with perfect light, and you are comparing it to your photo at 10 a.m. When the lighting is not good, etc. Then there's a lot of science behind the fact that it makes us feel worse about ourselves. The same thing is true when we see somebody whose career just seems to if I hadn't shared what happened to me just a couple of weeks ago, right? You could see, if you wanted to cherry pick, you could see that wow, he played with the Washington National Opera for a few weeks, and then he played with Rodney Marsalis, and then he presented at these conferences, and then he it's like it all looks as glamorous as tuba can. But the fact is that there was like this devastating setback in the middle of that, right? And we don't all, and I don't fault anybody for not sharing that part of their journey. Some people are not in safe enough spaces to do that. I truly, I have no opinion about how anyone else, what they share or what they don't share. I just know that if I think that someone's career path is linear and then mine isn't, I can use that to beat myself up. And if their photo is perfect, but it's kind of coming off as just like, oh, just snap this real quick. And then I compare that to myself snapping this real quick. If you're on YouTube, you can see I pulled up the camera. I was like, holy moly, I need a haircut really badly. I needed to shave like 5 days ago. And yeah, I look pretty funny. Anyway, long story short, we got to be resilient, right? And so nobody's path is linear. And sometimes we make the setbacks happen on our own, and that's okay as long as we learn from it and we keep on going. Okay, so thank you to Carol Burnett for that. Thank you to the amazing Brene Brown. I can't wait for you to hear this quote for next week because in next week's episode, it's really good stuff. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you to all of you who are Patreon supporters. Thank you to everybody who's subscribed to YouTube channel. I think I missed a word or two in there. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you so much for listening. And that is going to do it for another episode of The Entrepreneurial Musician.